Hey guys, welcome back to more malicious compliance Reddit stories. In this Ripe video, you are a dinosaur and your entire department is worthless. That is what my new VP screamed at me right before he fired us all to move production overseas. What he did not realize was that I didn't just build the panels, I owned the rights to them, and he wanted us gone, so we complied and everything collapsed. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one starts like this. So for some context, I work in a very niche sector of architectural manufacturing. We don't just build walls, we create high-end custom-molded acoustic paneling for concert halls, luxury hotels, and recording studios. These are not the foam squares you buy online, these are massive heavy structures that have to be cured at exact temperatures to have specific sound dampening qualities. If you get the chemical mixture wrong, they shatter. If you get the curing heat wrong, they melt or warp. If you get the density wrong, they don't block sound and the client sues you for millions because their opera house sounds like a high school gym. About 15 years ago, I ran my own small fabrication shop doing this. I developed a specific curing process and a proprietary blend of resins that made my panels lighter and stronger than anything else on the market. A larger construction conglomerate bought me out. It was a good deal. They wanted my tech and I wanted their distribution network. However, I was not born yesterday. When I sold my shop to them, my lawyer, a paranoid guy who I owe my life to, inserted a very specific clause regarding the intellectual property. The contract stated that the conglomerate bought the distribution rights and the physical assets of my shop, but I retained the production rights and the patent on the curing process. The company was granted an exclusive royalty-free license to use my process only as long as I was employed as the director of production to oversee quality control. The logic was simple: the process is dangerous if done wrong. Chemicals can explode and fumes can be toxic. I insisted that I had to be there to ensure safety. If they fired me for any reason other than gross criminal misconduct, the license would expire immediately and the rights to manufacture using my method would revert entirely to me. And yeah, for over a decade this was fine. The old leadership knew the deal, we made money hand over fist, I ran the floor with my team and our department had zero accidents and our panels were the gold standard in the industry. Then the old CEO retired and the company was acquired by a firm looking to so-called trim the fat. And by the way guys, that is always the beginning of the end. Either way, enter the new vice president of operations, let's call him Gary. Gary was the definition of a corporate seagull. He flew in, made a lot of noise and crapped on everything and expected us to thank him for it. However, he was obsessed with two things: offshoring and AI. He truly believed that domestic manufacturing was a relic of the past and that anything physical could be digitized and outsourced. The friction started the first week he walked onto the production floor. He was wearing an expensive suit and wrinkled his nose at the smell of the resin. He looked at my team, guys and girls who are essentially artisans, and just saw numbers on a spreadsheet that he wanted to delete. He started holding meetings where he would show us optimizations generated by some AI business model. He would project these graphs on the wall showing how much money we could save if we moved production to a specific factory in Southeast Asia and replaced our design team with generative AI software. By the way guys, famous last words. There's no way in hell that would ever work for a serious company. Anyway, I tried to explain the reality to him multiple times. I sat in his office and told him that the design is not just a picture, it's a 3D model that has to account for thermal expansion. You cannot just ask an AI to make a cool wavy wall panel, because the AI doesn't understand that resin shrinks by 2% when it cools. If you build the mold based on an AI image, the final product won't fit together. However, Gary did not care. He told me I was being a gatekeeper and he said I was afraid of the future. He called my team legacy overhead. Things came to a head about 6 months into his tenure. I came into work on a Tuesday to find my access badge did not open the parking gate anymore. I thought it was a glitch or something, so I parked in the visitor lot and walked to the front desk. The receptionist looked at me with wide panicked eyes and told me that I needed to go straight to HR. I walked into the conference room and there was Gary, sitting with a woman from HR and a security guard. There was a cardboard box on the table. Gary looked smug. He looked like a man who had just saved the company millions. He slid a folder across the table towards me. "We are restructuring," Gary said, not even looking at me in the eye. "We have successfully negotiated a contract with a manufacturing partner overseas. They can produce the panels at 40% of your domestic cost. Furthermore, we've implemented a new design workflow using advanced algorithms that render your manual oversight obsolete." And guys, let me guess, advanced algorithm means ChatGPT. Well, I opened the folder and it was a standard termination letter. They were firing me and my entire department. 30 people, just gone. I looked at Gary. "You're moving production? To where?" He named a country known for cheap plastic manufacturing, not precision acoustic engineering, and he said, "They have their files, they start production next week." I took a deep breath and said, "Gary, you cannot do that." He scoffed. "Excuse me? I'm the VP of Operations, I can do whatever is best for the shareholders." "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I mean, you legally cannot do that. Have you read my employment contract? The one regarding the IP rights?" Gary rolled his eyes so hard I thought they would fall out of his head. "Oh god, here we go, the magic contract, huh? Listen to me, you glorified mechanic. We own the service, we own the CAD files, we own the brand name, we own the factory. We don't need your permission to use our own property." I corrected him and said, "You own the physical machines." I corrected, "but the process, the specific temperature ratios and the resin formula is licensed to you only while I'm employed here. If you fire me, you lose the right to use that process. You cannot manufacture these panels without infringing on my patent." Gary stood up. He slammed his hand on the table. "I've had enough of your insubordination. This is exactly why we are getting rid of you. You think you're irreplaceable, huh? You're not. Your entire department is worthless. You are an expense, a dinosaur. The legal department has looked at everything and we are clear. Now sign the acknowledgement, take your box and get out of my building along with your team. If you say one more word about rights, I will have security drag you out." I looked at the HR woman, she was staring at her shoes. I looked at the security guard, he looked bored, and then I looked at Gary. "You're ordering me and my team to leave immediately and stop advising you on production matters, huh?" I asked. "I'm ordering you to shut up and get out," Gary said. "You are done. We don't want your advice and we don't want your expertise. We want you gone." This was the moment, the malicious compliance. He wanted me gone. He wanted me to stop gatekeeping the production. He wanted to do it his way, with his cheap factory and his AI designs. "Okay," I said. "I understand. I'm leaving." I didn't argue, I didn't scream, I didn't even threaten to sue. I simply signed the paper acknowledging I had received the termination notice. So I stood up, took the empty cardboard box, didn't even bother going to my desk to pack my personal mug, and walked out the front door. I went home, made a sandwich and sat on my back porch. I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't have to worry about the kiln temperatures. The next morning, I didn't call a lawyer to sue for wrongful termination. That takes too long and costs too much money. Instead, I opened my laptop and drafted a formal letter. It was not to the company, it was to the United States Customs and Border Protection (CBP) and the International Trade Commission. I attached a copy of my patent, I attached a copy of the contract showing that the license was tied to my employment, and I attached a termination letter proving I was no longer employed. I formally registered my production rights with customs, flagging the company's specific product line as unauthorized counterfeit goods infringing on my intellectual property. I also sent a certified letter to the company's legal department, not to Gary, but to the general counsel, simply stating, "Per my termination on date XYZ, the license to utilize the patent is officially revoked. Any further manufacturing or importation of goods utilizing this process is a violation of federal law." Then I went fishing. I spent the next 2 months relaxing. I had a decent severance package, standard corporate policy, and I had some savings. I knew how long the manufacturing cycle took. It takes about 4 weeks to spin up the molds, 2 weeks to cure a large batch, and 4 weeks for ocean freight. About 3 weeks into my unemployment, I got a call from a number I recognized. It was one of the guys from my old floor. He told me the factory was a ghost town nowadays. They had shipped all the molds to the overseas facility. He said that Gary was walking around like a king, bragging about how smooth the transition was and how the AI was churning out new organic designs that the architects were gonna love. I just listened and said, "Yeah, that's interesting. Good luck to you, man." 6 weeks in, I started looking for some work. And yeah, I didn't have to look very hard. Our biggest competitor, a company that had been trying to poach me for years, heard that I was on the market, and I had a meeting with their CEO. It was a very different meeting than the one with Gary. The CEO shook my hand, offered me coffee and asked, "So is it true? Did they really let you go without securing the rights?" "They sure did," I said. The CEO laughed for a solid minute. "We would like to hire you and we would like to buy a license for your process. Properly." I signed with them that afternoon, but here's the kicker. I made sure my new contract allowed me to bring my old team with me. And well, over the next week, the competitor hired almost everyone Gary had fired. We set up shop in a new facility about 20 miles down the road, and then came the day of reckoning. It had been about 10 weeks since I was fired by that point. That was the timeline for the first massive shipment from the overseas factory to arrive at the port of Los Angeles. I was not there to see it, but I can imagine the scene because I have the official government correspondence. The container ship arrived. The cranes unloaded the containers. The company's logistics trucks were lined up, ready to take the product to the distribution warehouses. The company was desperate for this stock because they had been sold out for a month while the factory was transitioning. They had millions of dollars in back orders waiting. Customs officers opened the containers, they checked the manifest, they checked the product code, then they checked their database. And well, there was a ping. Status seized. Intellectual property violation. The officers didn't just hold the shipment, they seized it, thousands of acoustic panels, millions of dollars of inventory, all of it legally classified as counterfeit contraband because it was made using my patented process without a license. I was sitting in my new office working on a layout for a new concert hall when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, so I let it go to voicemail, but it rang again immediately, then third time, and I picked up. "This is OP. You son of a gun!" It was scary. He was screaming so loud that the microphone was distorting. "What did you do? The port authority is holding our cargo. They said you flagged it as stolen." "Hello, Gary," I said, putting the phone on speaker so my new boss could hear. "I didn't say it was stolen. I just said it was infringing on my rights. Because it is." "Undo it!" he screamed. "Call them right now and tell them it's a mistake. We have customers waiting. We are losing $100,000 a day." "I cannot do that, Gary," I said calmly. "I don't work for you, and you don't have a license. Those panels were made illegally. If I release them, I dilute my patent rights. My lawyer advised me strictly against that. We paid for them, we paid for the shipping, we own them." "You paid a factory to produce counterfeit goods," I explained like I was talking to a toddler. "That's a risk you take when you outsource without checking your contracts." "I will sue you into the ground," he threatened. "I will take your house." "Actually," I said, "my lawyer is currently drafting a lawsuit against you for patent infringement for the unauthorized use of my molds. The statutory damages are quite high per unit. And since you just imported 5,000 units, well, you can do the math." I hung up. The fallout was spectacular. The company couldn't fulfill their orders. They missed deadlines for 3 major stadium projects. The construction companies invoked penalty clauses in their contracts charging the company for every day of delay. Desperate, Gary tried to get the overseas factory to change the design to get around the patent, and this is where the AI compliance came in to bite him. He had the AI generate new mold shapes that looked similar but were technically different enough to maybe bypass the patent, and he sent those files to the factory. By the way, guys, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to like the video and post a comment if you enjoy the malicious compliance stories. Thank you so much for your support. Also, let me know where you are watching from today. They rushed production of these ones and they skipped the prototype phase because they were in a panic. They then shipped the new panels by air freight, which costs a fortune, to bypass the port seizure from previously, and the panels arrived at the construction sites. The installers put them up. 2 days later, the reports started coming in. The AI design structure didn't account for the structural load or the humidity. The panels started warping. Huge heavy resin slabs began popping off the walls. In one luxury hotel lobby, a 300-pound panel fell and shattered on the marble floor, barely missing a guest. It was just a total disaster. The company's reputation was incinerated overnight. The board of directors finally woke up and they fired Gary. They cited gross negligence and failure to perform due diligence. A week later, the chairman of the board called me. He was humble and he sounded tired, and he offered me my job back, and he even offered me a raise. He offered me a signing bonus. He practically begged me to come back and turn the lights back on. And I said, "I appreciate the offer, but I'm already employed. And frankly, my new employer respects the production process and I don't think I can come back." "We will double your previous salary," he said. "It's not about the money. It's about the fact that you let a guy like Gary dismantle a 15-year operation because a computer program told him it would be cheaper." I cannot trust you anymore. So I declined. My new company staffed by my old team stepped in to fill the void. We picked up all the contracts the old company defaulted on. Since we knew the clients and the specs, it was an easy transition. We were the heroes who saved the stadium projects. The old company struggled on for another 18 months and they tried to pivot to cheaper foam products, but their brand was toxic and nobody trusted them anymore. They were drowning in lawsuits from the botched installation and the contract penalties. 2 years after I was fired, the company filed for bankruptcy. They liquidated everything. My new boss actually bought some of their equipment at the auction. We got my old curing ovens back for pennies on the dollar. It was surreal walking through the empty factory during the auction preview, and I saw Gary's old office. It now was empty except for a broken chair and a whiteboard that still had faint marker lines on it. I walked closer to the whiteboard. You could see where someone had erased a chart, but the ghost image remained. It was a graph showing projected savings with a line going straight up to the moon. I stood there for a minute looking at that graph, then I went back to my truck, drove to my new state-of-the-art facility, and got back to work making things the right way. The best part? Because the old company went bankrupt, the rights to my original distribution agreements reverted back to the creator in the event of liquidation, another clause my paranoid lawyer insisted on. So now, I not only own the production rights, I own the entire catalog of designs I made for them. I essentially got paid to take a 2-month vacation, upgraded my job, upgraded my team's pay, destroyed a soul-sucking corporation, and got all my old work back for free. All because Gary could not be bothered to listen when I told him, "You cannot do that." Edit, I will answer a few common questions in the comments here. Did the company try to sue me for sabotage? Yeah, briefly they did. About a month after the seizure, I got a threatening letter claiming I had sabotaged the company by maliciously withholding critical business information. My lawyer responded with a copy of the meeting transcript. I didn't record it, but the HR summary confirmed that Gary told me to stop speaking and a signed termination letter where I acknowledged that I was leaving. The argument was simple. I tried to tell them and the authorized officer of the company, Gary, ordered me to remain silent and vacate the premises. You cannot sue an ex-employee for failing to do a job you fired them from. They dropped it pretty fast when they realized discovery would just embarrass them further. What happened to the overseas factory? Well, they were just a contract manufacturer. They got stiffed on the bill, I assume. The old company likely never paid them for the seized shipment because they never took delivery. So the overseas factory probably took a massive loss too. It's just a chain reaction of incompetence. Why didn't HR stop him, you're asking? Well, HR is there to protect the company, not the employee. Gary convinced them that I was a liability and that my contract was just boilerplate that they could ignore. They bet on Gary being right, but they bet wrong. In the bankruptcy proceedings, I heard the entire HR department was let go pretty early on. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Let me start with some background because context is needed. So I'm not someone who got into the fad of homesteading. I grew up on a farm and I knew how much work it took to manage even with multiple people involved. I waited until I had enough money saved up to buy my own piece of land that I could do what I wanted with it. I wanted to be self-sufficient and have a place I could own where I could live with the land and do what I wanted with it. The area I moved to in order to fulfill that dream was a rural area with lots of farms and large plots of land in between property lines. I've had my homestead for 5 years now. The land was originally a farm, so there were a few buildings left over that I updated or repurposed into living spaces, garages, or storage areas. I had enough space to plant vegetables and fruit trees, and I got chickens, ducks, and rabbits as livestock. I live with my partner, so I'm not doing all of the work alone, and the lifestyle is something that she's more than alright with as well. With every update I made, with every action I took, I would always check the local bylaws to make sure I was not doing something illegal or towing the line on a law that I could be fined for. There were still a few things I was learning at the time that this occurred, but I've made sure that now, about 2 years later, I know what I'm doing. So, context given. Now for what actually happened. This all started because I was bored. I thought I would challenge myself and build one of those log grills because I didn't have any large projects to work on for my homestead. It was not too difficult. I had a large amount of wood to work with if I messed up. It did take me 3 tries to get it working how I wanted to. It was a neat little project that took up some time, but it was worth it when I got the thing working. I decided to do some grilling on it before the sun got too low and decided to cook some steaks and crisp up some veggies for me and my partner. The one downside about this grill was the amount of smoke coming off of it. It was not enough to make people think there was a fire starting, but from a distance someone could get concerned. Which was why, when I put out the flames and was finishing the crust on the steaks, I heard the sound of sirens coming up the road. A fire truck and 2 police cars came up my driveway and onto my property. A few firefighters getting out of the truck to come towards me. Apparently, someone said they were my neighbor and had called 911 to report a fire hazard in the area. The firefighters and officers were obligated to see what was going on. I explained that it was not an actual fire, just a grill, and showed them just how much smoke it made. The firefighters were satisfied and headed out first, but the officers needed to write up a report just to let their superiors know what had happened. I did ask them if they could tell me who made the call, but they told me that they did not get a name. However, when they left, I could see someone on the edge of my property line standing there, arms crossed. And that is how I met Karen for the first time. And yeah guys, that's not the How I Met Your Mother story I was thinking of at first. More like how I met my lifelong enemy. Anyway, Karen, which is not her real name, had moved into the property that bordered mine a few weeks before. When I approached her, she had some things to say, which I will highlight here. It's not the exact wording, but it's close that you get the point. Karen, you've got some nerve. Me, hey there, I don't think we have met. I'm your new neighbor, and I don't like what I saw tonight. Me, I'm OP. Listen, I know there was a lot of smoke, but I was just grilling up food for me and my partner. Karen, you were being a nuisance. That is what you were. The smell coming from your place was horrible. I had to close my windows because of you. Me, well, I'm sorry about that. It was my first time working with a log grill, so I didn't realize how much smoke would be coming off of it. Karen, well, maybe consider not using it again. The smell was terrible. It weirded me out that she kept harping about the smell, not about the fire hazard that the police and firefighters had been called in for. I thought maybe she was not the one who called it in. I have other neighbors a bit farther away that could have seen the smoke and thought there was a problem, so I let it go for the time being. I did not touch the log grill for about a month after that. Now, contrary to popular belief, homesteaders still need to get things from the store. As much as I would love to be able to craft my own pots, pans and aluminum foil, I have to rely on the local general store. I have to travel a bit, close to 30 minutes, but the store I go to has everything I need without having to travel farther out of the way. I admit I might be partly in the wrong for airing my grievances out to the cashier, but I had known him for years, we will call him Bob, and I just needed to talk to someone about what happened between me and Karen and how I felt that she was overreacting. Bob listened and told me that I had a right to do what I wanted on my own property. Her calling the fire department to just talk about the amount of smoke that she was able to smell, but masking it as a fire hazard, could be illegal. He told me that I should just watch myself around where our properties met, so I tried out my log grill again, and I made sure I was further into my property. There wasn't as much smoke, and I'd made sure to do it on a day that wasn't windy. 20 minutes later, who shows up? Sirens wailing, but the firefighters and the police. I asked them what the issue was and pointed out that my grill was not even producing that much smoke. The firefighters told me that someone had called about smelling smoke on my property, and as usual, they had to check it out to confirm no one was in danger. I gave my report to the police and I saw Karen again standing at the edge of my property. I was too angry to confront her, so I just went back to my house to try and come up with what I should do. And yeah guys, if you would have been in this situation, what would you have done about this ridiculous Karen that constantly calls the police on you? And by the way, while we're at it, please don't forget to like the video because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. So I stopped using my grill entirely, but I didn't want Karen to know that she was the one who was controlling my actions on my own land. I was not doing anything illegal, I was not getting on her property with my grill, I was just cooking. So with a suggestion from my partner, I looked a bit deeper into the zoning laws and found that since my homestead was classified as a farm, I could perform several actions that neighbors couldn't call on police for nuisance complaints. And this is when I got petty. As a homesteader, one of the things that helped me grow hardy crops was through composting. I saved as much food waste as I could in a compost container. I'd been meaning to expand my composting since I was growing a lot more than I had been when I first bought my homestead, so I decided to set up a composting area right at the property line between mine and Karen's property. When I was digging the trench I would use to put my composting materials in, I saw Karen watching me from a bit away. She did not stop me, did not call the police that day. I was still on my side of the property line and was not breaking any laws. I knew she was going to do something when I started getting all of my supplies together, but I relished the times that I just see her watching. And I knew that once I got started, there wasn't going to be anything she could do about it. Composting is not just throwing rotting food or cardboard into a ventilated area and waiting for it to turn into dirt. There's a process that helps with the breakdown of the organic material, and the person who's composting needs to actively work the material in order for it to decompose properly. It takes a bit of time, but getting nutrient-rich compost to help boost growth is a great reward. What comes with that is a smell that is absolutely horrible. Paired with adding the droppings from my livestock, rabbit droppings are actually very good for composting, I learned that year, the property line smelled vile. And Karen responded to that smell with complaints. I got no less than 5 visits from the police over the course of a month, but each of their claims was not something I was doing at the time. Karen apparently did not learn from the last time she called the cops on me and made up different excuses. I need to shout out the officers that kept coming onto my property. I cannot say their full names or badge numbers here, but if they are reading this, they know who they are. They were polite and respectful of my property, making sure that their vehicles didn't go anywhere outside of the driveway. They provided their reasoning for coming onto my property, took my statement, and left without issue. 2 years after this whole situation, I still buy them a beer if I see them at one of the local restaurants. I had no issue with them, it was Karen that was causing the problem. When the emergency line didn't work, Karen resorted to the non-emergency line. I received calls and letters about complaints regarding my property, but I was legally in the right. As I told the office that called, I had the specific verbiage from the bylaws regarding that, and I even visited the office to provide them with the proof in their own documents that I was the one being harassed by someone who didn't care about the laws of the area. Eventually, they stopped reaching out to me about my infractions, so I thought that everything was settled. But it wasn't. While I was running some errands at the general store about a month and a half after I started composting, Bob told me that Karen had been in there earlier ranting about how her neighbor should be more considerate and how she was going to go to the town council about everything that happened over the course of the last few months. Bob figured that I was the neighbor since Karen had told him about a homesteading hippie that was composting near her property line, and Bob wanted to make sure I was aware of what she was gonna do. There were council meetings held on the first Saturday of every month, so I figured that was where she would go with her complaints. The next month was coming up, so I bided my time and made sure I came in prepared for whatever Karen could throw at me. My partner helped with the research and we came up with what would hopefully be enough against what Karen was going to present to the council. The meeting started out a bit boring, talking about new zoning laws, how property taxes were being updated over the next fiscal year, that sort of talk. My partner and I were just waiting for Karen to stand up and demand her time, and sure enough, she did. I got up when she stood up and told the council that her complaints were in regards to my property. Karen was more than fine with the admission, letting me know that it would be easier for her to make her case since there was a face to the person she was accusing. And so Karen started her explanation. I realized early on that Karen was bringing up laws and bylaws that applied to suburban areas. In a rural community, especially one that had more than a few farms around, she didn't have a clue as to how things worked. She made sure to let me know that I was a menace to the neighborhood and that my infringement on her rights as a landowner could land me in deep trouble with the courts or even worse. I had to stop myself from rolling my eyes at her closing remarks. Karen, this man is a menace. He should be tried for the health hazard that he's introduced into the community. I say he has his day in court and is properly punished for what he's done. The city council took a moment to let the room settle and then asked if I had a rebuttal against the accusations raised against me. I had a few pages of printouts of the laws that included my property and gave them to the council while I made my case. I did not mince words. I told everyone that I had a legal right to do what I did on my property. I explained that the first 2 times the police and fire department came onto my property, it was because I was grilling. Since Karen thought that the smoke from my property was a fire hazard based on the officer's explanation, I wanted to shift my focus from what could have been seen as potentially dangerous to a practice that wouldn't make her worry. I explained about my previous plans and attempts at composting and how her intervention bolstered my resolve to do something that would be more beneficial to my homestead. I provided the printouts of the bylaws, making sure to highlight that because of the agricultural protection laws on my property, Karen could not complain about my practices. I made sure to indicate that the amount of space I devoted to my livestock, even though they were small, and the land that I used to grow crops made my homestead fall into the category of a rural farm, and I could perform farm practices without fear of retaliation. Unlike the laws that could be infringed upon in an urban or suburban setting, my practices were legal. If I'd been trying to create a compost trench in a suburb or cooked on a log grill that put a lot of smoke in the air, then I would absolutely be fined and could be taken to court for my actions if someone thought that I was a danger to myself or my neighbors. And by the way, guys, I was just thinking, if there is a lot of smoke in a street coming from a restaurant or something, in Thailand that usually means that is a restaurant that has their grilling done right. That's usually a place I would visit because you can smell if it is good or not. Then again, huge difference compared to Western countries. Anyway, the rural area I lived in did not have those kinds of laws. I had a lot of land that I was able to use to my heart's content, and every action I took in the past few months had been on my property and legal under the laws that governed the area. Karen attempted a rebuttal, but the council asked for proof of the laws that I'd infringed on. She didn't have printouts, and the laws she brought up were fact-checked by a member of the council. Well, as it turned out, Karen knew nothing about the area's laws and was literally making things up to try and save face. It backfired spectacularly in this case, and the council deemed that she did not have a leg to stand on when it came to calling out issues with things that were on my property. When the council meeting was adjourned, Karen ran out of the room like her pants were on fire. I didn't want to publicly humiliate her, but apparently that is what my presentation had done. Bob made sure to tell me the next time I came into his store for supplies that she had been very quiet and had not said a word about me or my composting. I found out at the beginning of the year that Karen moved away, and I'll be honest, I think it was for the best. She seemed to be comfortable with a particular sort of life, and I don't think living in a rural area next to a homestead was the best place for her. Look, she gave me grief for a few months, but I truly wish her well. And the next one is a funny malicious compliance story, which is titled Boss Who Insisted on Email Red Receipts. A few years back, I had a manager that insisted on micromanaging his supervisors and sent numerous emails every day and insisted on a red receipt for each one. This was back in the days where BlackBerry phones were the normal, and I knew he got a message through with the red receipt. I also figured out that I could read the emails without opening them, and I used to save up 100 or so emails for him and would wait until I knew he was at a work event or at home and would then click Mark All as read on 100 emails at a time. This resulted in the manager getting a 100 emails through at the same time on his BlackBerry phone, along with 100 notifications. After repeating this several times, he finally dropped the red receipt, and it felt like a minor battle had been won against him. And yeah guys, that's a perfect combination of malicious compliance and petty revenge. Thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.